Bill Morneau, first of all, good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for stopping by to talk to me. Listen, I took a moment to review your mandate letter from 2015, and your number one priority in that mandate letter is to get us back to balanced books by 2020. What's happened? That seems to be an afterthought now.
You know, what we've absolutely seen as our first priority, and it's not a surprise to you, it's not a surprise to any Canadian, is to invest in middle class success. That is important from our perspective. It's had the results that we expected. It's had the results of allowing for us to build more jobs together. It's had the results of greater economic growth. It's also had the results of having a better and better fiscal situation. You've seen in this fall economic statement that we have a much more robust economy. So I'll acknowledge that that was something that in our election campaign we talked about in a different economic time. And what we're doing right now is we're making sure that we make the right investments for the future based on where we're at today.
Does it matter to you to have a date to return to balance? Is it, for instance, is it something we could see you talk about in your last budget before the election coming up in February or March? Will we hear about a plan to get back to balance then?
You know, I think this is very much a discussion that I get in this environment, in the Ottawa, what I'll call the Ottawa bubble. I will tell you that when I'm out around the world, other countries look at us with envy. They look at our, what I'll call our balance sheet. They look at the amount of debt that we have as a function of our economy, and they see that we're vastly better off than our allies. We're less than half the average of the G7 countries. So that doesn't absolve us from having to be fiscally prudent. We still need to. So we are reducing the amount of that debt as a function of our GDP over time. We're also reducing the amount of the deficit as a function of our GDP over time. These are important objectives, but I come back to the fact that we need to have a balanced approach. Our approach has been grow the economy, create jobs, find ourselves in a situation where Canadians are doing better. And that's exactly what we did in the fall economic statement. We gave the opportunity that we've shown that businesses now can make investments that are going to continue economic growth and job growth.
How do you, those measures you took today, what are your expectations now of the business community? Now that you've provided this accelerated write-off measure, how confident are you that they're going to take you up on it?
Well, I'm very confident that it puts us in a more competitive position vis-a-vis our chief geographical ally, the United States. So to the extent a business was looking at their investment opportunity before we made these measures in Canada versus the United States, they now are in a very different situation after, because that acceleration of their depreciation expense means that on a next investment, they'll have a 5 percentage point advantage in Canada versus the United States. This is really material. So we know that that will drive behavior that's important for us to create investment and to create jobs.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked about it today in your remarks about the economic challenges being faced in particular in Saskatchewan and Alberta mostly, because of the oil price gap. You acknowledge there's a problem out there. How does this economic update and the measures you've announced here, how does that help Saskatchewan and Alberta deal with this particular crisis?
I think I did talk about it today because it's a really big challenge. I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of concern in Alberta, but certainly in Ottawa as well, with this big price differential that we see for our oil and gas resources.
I mean, if it continues, it'll ripple through the whole economy, right?
Well, it's not good for anyone. I mean, it's obviously not good for the overall economy. It's particularly challenging for the industry. It's also very challenging for Alberta. So I completely understand the sense of intense concern. This is what drove us to decide to make the purchase of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. This capacity to get our resources to international markets is not a new problem. This has been a problem that's been around for a long time. We took a really important decision to purchase that pipeline so we can get resources to market. What we did today, the decision to allow businesses to depreciate their investments more rapidly, helps all businesses in all sectors in all parts of the country. So that's important, but particularly it helps businesses that have significant capital investment requirements. So if you think about the oil and gas sector or the telecommunications sector, that's really important. The oil and gas sector, there'll be an advantage to make those investments.
But how many of those companies are looking at investments in the current climate in Western Canada right now? A lot of them are shutting down, not looking at expanding.
I'm not arguing that we've got a silver bullet. I recognize that this challenge is significant. The ongoing discussions in the industry with Alberta are critically important. What I am saying is we are part of the long-term solution, creating advantage to make investments, finding a way to get our resources to international markets. These are critically important. I know that the sector is feeling that challenge immensely. I also know that they will see those two things as being critically important. The challenge is that they're trying to find other measures that will further deal with this situation. And for that, I think working together with the Alberta government is going to be critical.
Do you expect do you expect to have to take measures to compete? How long do you expect to have to take measures to compete with the Americans? Let me put it that way. They've got a timeline on the incentives that they've provided, corporate tax cuts and accelerated write-offs there. You've put these in place to 2027 to match their timeline. Do you expect to have to go that long?
Well, your first question is how long will we have to compete with
forever,
the Americans? Forever.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly we live in a competitive environment, and what we need to think about is what are the things that we need to do to compete. It wasn't just taxes today. I mean, we talked about trade diversification. We talked about putting significant resources so we could diversify our trade. We've already said we want to deal with the United States through our renegotiated NAFTA, but we also need to go in other places. So that was important. We put in place ways of us making sure our regulations stay to protect Canadians, but also deal with business challenges. And we've talked about tax changes. So we need to be operating on all cylinders to be effective, and that's what we're trying to do.
Two quick things to finish on. You touched on trade. You've got a program to try and expand exports to other foreign markets. An increase in exports of 50% by 2025. How realistic is that?
We think it's realistic. We looked at our current situation. I mean, we've got trade agreements with 2/3 of the global economy. That's an important starting point. So what we're doing is we're thinking about the ways we can actually help. We're going to have ways to help small and medium-sized businesses in Canada to think about how they can actually do trade. We're going to put more trade counselors around the world so they can actually help people when they get there. We're going to think about accelerator offices in different parts of the world where, tech companies can go and they can actually start being part of the local economy, getting our services there. So there's multiple things that we're working on, and we need to have an objective. We have not been effective over the last generation at trading outside of trade with the United States. That's an important goal. We've set it out there, and we're going to find a way to achieve it.
Finish on this. You announced measures to support a struggling media industry in this country, and already some critics are suggesting you're trying to buy off the media in an election year. There's lots of places you could have put $600 million, but you put it into support for the media. How come?
We think a healthy democracy is absolutely essential, and we cannot see a way that we have a healthy democracy without a strong and free press. Simple as that. I do not think that it's realistic to think that we will influence how journalists see us by supporting a sector that we see as important for our country. And I think Canadians agree with us. Getting good sources of information is critically important. That's why we're supporting the sector in a way, by the way, that will be completely independent and arm's length. We will not be there to adjudicate. It will be an arm's length body, including journalists, that will actually decide how we do this. That's the way we do it.
Finance Minister Bill Morneau, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks.
Take care.
Cheers.